All right, we seem to be in here. Greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is March 22nd, 2021. We've got Jared Murphy with us today, co-hosting. Jared, how are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure to have you on, man. Today our guest is Geraldine Orozco, and many of you might have remember her name from episode 73. We were talking about human hybridization and other crazy things that is going on. And today we're going to have her back to talk about DNA reprogramming and the multidimensional body. So this sounds really interesting. Geraldine, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here again.
It's always great to have you on, and we're going to be doing part 3 in the future, so everybody look forward to that. Jared, you remember our last conversation with Geraldine?
I do.
Do you have
do
any questions lingering from that episode that you want to clear up before we go forward?
Given her general, a broad, deep knowledge base and what we're going to cover next with programming, I think we should probably just jump into it. Otherwise, I will digress and we can call this the follow-up to the first one, and she'll be endlessly on for like 6 more episodes,
Yes.
which is still fine, but we should. It's such a cool subject, what's coming up here. So I'm ready to move forward.
All right, well, let's just jump right into it. I just want to give a shout out to Mr. Fox, Blue Chicken, Hot Sauce is in here. How you doing? Soup and Stuff, I guess. TK22, Renee Cruz, all the mods are here. Hello. Hope everybody's having a great day. Geraldine, we want to talk a little bit about DNA programming, and when we talk about DNA programming, what you're talking about reprogramming is the fact that I guess we have a passed down DNA memories from our ancestors. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, so, the way that we look at our physical bodies right now is very limited. I mean, we tend to think of the physical body as just what this physical mass is underneath our body here. And, we learn a little bit about how, things that we do affect our body, but we often don't really realize at what extent the things that we do in our environment really affect what and who we are. And the question is this something that is learned experiences, learned behavior in the physical body, things that are resulting from things that are happening outside of us? Or is there an internal mechanism that's driving us to react and respond and to even participate in the creation of these experiences? And really what we're looking at is that this human body is such an incredibly complex system. It's a network of information that not only is interconnected with one another, each other. We are all interconnected as one. We really are one whole consciousness. And what that means is that we're pulling from a record of information, which we know as the Akashic Records, which you can say is kind of like the recording system of all the information, the historic timeline of this Earth and its surrounding, galaxies and everything that makes up our reality in our space that we live in. And so everything that is recorded in that space, within what we look to as the Akashic Records, we don't realize that we are actually a fractal of that knowledge base, of that information that is available to you. And as much as we are interconnected with one another, we are interconnected by the information that we have shared and the experiences that we seem to be cycling through the different phases of our lives and the phases of evolution of being a human here on Earth since the origin of its conception and the origin of mankind. So we hold all that information within our genetic code. So when we talk about DNA reprogramming, we're talking about accessing all of that information. And what we notice surfaces in our lives, which manifests itself. Of course, we have to understand the mechanics of creation. We function like holographic engines of creation. We are constantly projecting, and we are a projection of a manifestation of consciousness. And within the earth plane, we manifest as humans, right? And we have all the biological parts and all of the physical parts that are designed to create this human body, this human meat suit, the vessel, in which all of these other mechanisms are running in the back end. And the way that this human vessel interacts with this environment is by processing everything that we are experiencing around us and projecting what we are experiencing around us. And we do that by, of course, we know, if we want to look at maybe the more scientific part of it, we're looking at epigenetics, right? Epigenetics, our environment is basically rewriting our genetic code in a sense. It is adding to the information that is within the body. But what I see in the multidimensional body, and one of the first things that I discovered when I had the ability to, when I began to have this ability, is that we're actually creating from the inside out. So all the information that we are, everything that we've experienced, our emotions are actually aligning us and creating energetically through resonance, creating a match to the experiences that we're having. So either with people, places, and things, we are coming into this match constantly and creating in that way. So what DNA reprogramming is for is to kind of look at the things that we're creating that are causing blockages and suffering, that when you begin to review them in your own life, you'll begin to notice that they're actually repetitive patterns. And these can be identified by the repetitive emotions that you have throughout even your last 24 hours. If you begin to look at those, you begin to look at the past week, the past month, the past year, you begin to notice that there are some patterns in your emotions, in your behaviors, in your reactions to things. And so the inquiry is to take a look at the origin of those. Where did those come from? Were those something that we self-created? Is it something that we learned from our parents? Is it something that, and the question is, why have we learned those from our parents? Where did those programs, belief systems come from? So when you begin to trace them back to their origin, it really takes you down a rabbit hole of understanding our societal structure and what makes up society, what makes up structures of emotions, of belief systems. And you begin to realize that a lot of these things are not exactly, there are a lot of inverted truths from the natural truths that we find in nature, for example, which are more holistic, more constructive for the being. And you find this to be true because you're noticing that in your life, as applying all of these belief systems, we're going so well, right? It's causing suffering, it's causing blockages, it's causing pain, sometimes illnesses, it manifests into illnesses. So we really begin to look at that. And so what this is for is to begin to become aware of those things that no longer work for you and to begin to change them. And what we're finding by doing DNA reprogramming is that what is closest to truth, or what is closest to the most vitality, creative life force, is what is in alignment with nature. And nature has the most incredible laws of creation that we are a product of. We have that within our body. It's part of our genetic code. It's in our design. So if we learn them, we can bring the body back into a balanced state, body, mind, and soul. Mm-hmm. So that's what that's about.
All right. Well, that certainly has a lot to unpack there. Jared, you want to get started?
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be good to start with. You said that's how you guys start and then approach it. What exactly? I guess how do you advise on that? How do you advise people? I guess how do you consult on this?
So for example, the session is usually an hour and a half to 2 hours, and it's a pretty heavy session. Within that session, even though we address maybe one or two of these main programs, we are looking at patterns in your life. So first of all, we identify what those patterns are, and from one perspective, I can see them clearly in your body. I can see where you're holding on to those patterns energetically. I can see the blockages in your body. I can see where there is stagnation. But for me, it's not so much about my exercising my abilities as it is to empower you with the ability to begin to train yourself to do what I do. Because what I do is not something special. It's something that everyone can do. And I've learned that through my own personal transformation and work of doing this. When I was feeling these repetitive emotions and just so overwhelming, right? The thing was like, why do humans have to suffer so much? What can we do to understand how to manage these strong, powerful emotions that humans have and end up being very stuck, very depressed, even suicidal, sometimes. And eventually these things manifest into great illness. So to avoid those kinds of long-term and really destructive cycles of being, you begin to question whether these emotions are really truly constructive for yourself. So I take you to the emotions that are most patterned in your life, and we take them back to the root cause. And the memory of that root cause, it's not going to take a lot of work to get there because the way that we store information, it's holographic. We store information literally in every part of the body as one whole organism. And so this is our DNA is holographic and our human body is holographic. And the network systems of information and intercommunication within the body also function in this way. So, we have muscle memory. We have this energetic memory within the body. So you can tap into those memories without even having to go into hypnotherapy, for example, because I'm also a hypnotherapist. And that's one way to do it. And a lot of people think they need to go under or do hypnotherapy to be able to access some suppressed memories, for example. But what DNA reprogramming is about is to understand that we have that information. It's literally surfacing in the everyday behaviors that you have. So if you have patterns of anger or frustration throughout your day, okay, let's just take that and take it back to the very first time where you experienced that and begin to unpack that experience. So I work with the root of that experience, and what we do is I can see everything that you...
Hello?
Hi, can you hear me okay? I accidentally muted myself.
Yeah. Well, there's a self-edit. Nope, now you got to back
There
up.
you go. All right. Okay, so basically we go back to the root of that emotional pattern, and usually it'll immediately come up. As soon as you feel the emotion, you'll go back to the very first time you experienced it. And some people are so impressed with the fact that they can recall memories of themselves even in the womb. Okay, because it's in the memory of your body. So you begin to look at that and you begin to understand. And the purpose of that is that you create a broader perspective of this experience, of this event. And you support that part of you. Every time that we experience trauma, we literally create fragmentation. Fragmentation occurs as a result of trauma. And that means that an aspect of yourself is left suspended in that timeline. So you go back to that part of yourself and you, in other words, heal it and reintegrate it back into your body. And this is what it means to be whole. In the spiritual community, a lot of people say, you have to become whole again. What does that even mean? Well, I discovered it means that, you're reintegrating fragments of yourself that were that were going through traumas that were fragmented. And we have millions of fragmentations throughout our life. But it doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily have to do every single one of them. What you'll notice is that you're cycling through a certain lineage of thought, of programs. And every person, every family lineage is slightly different in that their stories are different, right? They have different programs, different pains. But ultimately, we are all entirely in this earth, experiencing duality. So the trauma will fall somewhere, either between the two emotions of fear and love, right? So depending on how we experience love and fear is how we are perceiving the things that occur to us. And this is how we also categorize whether something is good or bad. So we go and we address those perceptions and help heal and reintegrate that part. I end the session by anything that we haven't addressed in that healing. I assist you in learning how to remove it energetically from your body, because you can go really deep in, and usually the healing that is more, that will sustain longer, is by doing this kind of deprogramming. But from a surface level, you can also remove it energetically from your body. And it's a great way to maintain the healing daily. So, just continuing to keep your vibration at a certain rate. Your vibration is obviously an expression of everything that is within the subconscious mind. So if you maintain awareness of all of those parts of you that need healing, you can continue holding on to this healing for a longer time. So that's kind of how it works. And I work with them to learn how to activate up to the 13th chakra, so the 13th dimensional plane, where we are more easily connecting up to source or the higher self.
So is this more of a meditative treatment, or are you touching in on the endocrine system? Are you combining some sort of dietary, or is it just all? Is it? I'm trying to get. So when you're working with them, is it what? I'm not clear on the process. Is it more of a meditation? Is it?
Yeah, so I just explained the process, and basically we go into those subconscious places in the mind through meditation. And oftentimes I will use hypnotherapy techniques to take them there to those spaces. Yeah. But it's a meditative process, right? So all of this is done in the subconscious mind. So they have to be in a state of meditation in order to access emotional memory, right? This is not something that you, of course, eventually you train to do this in the waking state, right? That's where you reach a good level of awareness of yourself at all times. But this kind of heavy work is done in meditation. And, I don't give advice on any dietary restrictions or anything. I think everyone needs to intuitively connect with that to see what's best for them. But I do think that healing occurs on many different levels when you begin to do this kind of work, because your subconscious mind is creating. So we are constantly projecting into our reality our experiences.
I wanted to jump in here and I just wanted to ask a quick question. Can you pass down, I guess, emotional trauma that you experience after you've already had children?
That you've experienced after you've already had children? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And here's why. We pick up as children, when we're children from the womb all the way to the age of 7, we have all our centers completely open, completely aware. We are in a heightened state of awareness, and we're also absorbing a lot of information around us. And because we haven't clearly understood yet how to create filters with the information that we absorb around us, a lot of times we associate and things that we experience externally, like, for example, your mother's emotions, become yours. Okay, so this is how we begin to have these kinds of programs. So, for example, if you're a parent that's going through some traumatic experience, your child picks up, sometimes even before you're ready to be honest about your own emotions, and what you're feeling. So as parents, which is why it's so incredibly important for you to be aware of your emotions and to really take time to, review what's going on in your inner mind. Because your child picks up everything and it becomes a part of them. And oftentimes children feel that, they feel that it's their fault. They tend to sometimes feel guilt if there's a lot of stress or there isn't a harmonious environment, or sometimes they take it on as themselves, as a part of themselves, right? So your anger, your frustration, they take it on themselves. And by the time they reach teen years, they're really expressing that, because now they're dealing with other hormonal changes that really begin to express an imbalance in those emotions. And since we don't have the education out there to understand, really explain to us, how emotions, or what even emotions are, it becomes very conflicting. And as adults, we end up improperly processing emotions and expressing them. So, we function like these constant sponges of information until we're aware. And that awareness is actually the most incredible, powerful tool of free will that the human has. Otherwise, we're just puppets to everything,
All right. Cedric Orange from Sacramento says hello to you. And
Hi.
Hot Sauce wants to know, what is Geraldine's view on religion? Does she believe in reincarnation?
Oh, okay. First of all, hi to Cedric. Love Cedric. So great to see you here. Great. Thank you for that question. So, my focus on religions, I tend to believe that there's I separate the two topics, religion and reincarnation. I feel that even though a lot of religions, Eastern religions, have taken that, and maybe we heard about reincarnation through those religions, I think reincarnation has been studied or looked at or revered for centuries, even before religion was established. In many ancient cultures, we talk about the regeneration cycles and spirit, and how the spirit moves through natural things and the cycles and the archetypes that it moves through. So I think that there's a separation between that. I don't necessarily associate the two. And so, yes, I do believe in reincarnation, absolutely. And it's not just a belief, it's rather an experience that even when I had a near-death experience, I had the experience of understanding that how the soul or the essence is detaching from the physical body and beginning to experience a whole. And at the time of birth, coming in to attach to a certain lineage of information. And so I've both seen and experienced this, and also see it in my clients that I work with. Um, but religion is something quite separate. I think that religion, there are. If you look at the origins of religion, there is a certain origin point in which most religions were created, and the let's say the philosophies of those religions were created similarly to one another. Okay. And so I think organized religion has its purpose. But I don't necessarily believe that the purpose of those religions are to really empower the human to understand its whole spiritual expression. And yeah.
All right. Well, let me ask you this: do you think that reincarnation is like a forced thing on us? Like we're forced to go through this, or do we have a choice?
Well, I think that
I'm sorry, you must have muted yourself again.
yeah, my computer fell asleep. Sorry.
That's right.
I think that one of the things that the design of everything is in cyclical patterns. Okay, if we look at the algorithm of creation or the sacred geometry of creation in all living things, it is a cycle, and I think that that's just the design of how our consciousness moves in this multiverse. So I think it's part of. I do believe that it's part of the matrix reality, this holographic field that we are living in as consciousness, sharing this experience. But I do believe that we have the ability of moving, beyond that, beyond just the reincarnation cycle, let's say on Earth, for example, because we are not just this body. We are not just this experience. We are living simultaneously on multiple timelines. We have access to those timelines. We have access to those aspects of ourselves that are, you can call them incarnations, but I call them timelines. I don't think that time is linear, in which we're living and dying these different lifetimes in one straight line. I think we're living all of these potential timelines simultaneously right now. So my concept of reincarnation is not really linear as much as it is just continual, the transference of energy and consciousness.
Hey,
So,
Mike.
yeah.
Oh, I think we should definitely shout out to Hot Sauce first, and then Shinobi and Cedric Orange's question. Those two, although separate, if we give them to her at the same time, I think she could organize them together into kind of one answer.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Hot Sauce, for the super chat. I appreciate it. He said thanks for answering the question. And
Thank
go
you
ahead.
so much.
Go ahead, Jared.
So we have two questions, and I'm just going to throw the first one out, which is, what does Geraldine think about reincarnation as a forced effect thrust upon us from an outside force? And now, that's one question. The second question is from Cedric Orange. Geraldine, do you believe awareness is a permanent part of our existence and the experiences we have within awareness? Can we reveal psychic intuitiveness? And I know those are two separate questions, but I have certainly had similar, and between reincarnation as a forced effect and psychic intuitiveness, I feel like they kind of do go hand in hand, but those are two questions.
So let's start with the first question.
Reincarnation as a forced effect thrust upon us from an outside force, or is it just I'm guessing what's implied is whether or not it's just a default setting for life.
Yes, and I also know that some people believe that we are we're stuck in a reincarnation cycle, or we're stuck on this planet Earth, which is like a school or a jail. Some people think of it.
I don't either. We've talked extensively about it, so you're in the right platform for where we're not down. Yeah. Go ahead. Totally agree.
So so let's talk about those possibilities, and I have to say that my thoughts on this have evolved over the past 10-15 years, because and I've studied many religions as well, right? And some religions you talk about the reincarnation, and the Buddhists and the Hinduism, they discuss the reincarnation and the purpose of reincarnation. But I tend to believe that now it's not so much that we live in a prison planet, right? It's not so much that we live in a stuck reincarnation part. I do feel that what we're here to experience collectively is awareness, and we're here to experience, basically, period, right? And in that experience, we have the ability of experiencing polarity. And so as we experience that, and again, it's only one fractal of many aspects of ourselves that are accessible to us. And they're accessible to us at any time. The more that we become aware during this small little 100 years of a life that we have, of all of our parts of ourselves, which are not, our current physical life here, where you and I are speaking and interacting, is a very small part of your entire human bioorganism. Your organism is very active in dream time. You're constantly moving, traveling in dream time. You're actually a lot more of your work is carried out in dream time, and even in death. So, and there's a lot of incredible, historically, the Egyptians, the Celtics, the Druids, even all of these different ancient cultures really looked at how death and the cycles of death and dream time were an opportunity for the soul to move beyond the physical plane, to begin to, travel, to do work in the astral planes. So I think that the more that we learn in this human body to experience our multidimensionality and to become acquainted with our abilities to navigate in our multidimensionality, we are employing free will, which is something that I'm very, it's important for me to talk about a free will, because I don't think we're clear on how we can access free will or how we can apply that. I think free will should be applied first in your waking state, and it's very confusing for most people what that really means. It's not like, oh, I get to choose who I vote for. That's not, it goes beyond that. It goes into the laws of creation. And I think that once you understand those laws of creation and manifestation, then you can begin to access another level. It's like another playing field of the human in this world. And you begin to wake up in waking time. With that, you begin to wake up in dream time, and you begin to navigate. You can master yourself in the Akashic, the astral plane. So in the astral plane, you can, manage yourself, you can travel, you can do remote viewing, all these things. All of these are essential parts of the human body, the human experience that we must learn, because when it comes to death, we are basically entering the next level of that navigation, where now the soul, detached from this physical body, temporary physical body, now has the ability to navigate other aspects. And if we're not aware, based on our vibrational frequency, we may, by resonance, continue to reincarnate back in cyclical patterns of belief systems, cyclical patterns of quote unquote what we know as karma or cause and effect, and these limiting beliefs that we keep coming into. So I feel it's more about understanding free will than it is thinking that we live in a prison planet or a school. I think it goes a little beyond that.
So, have you heard of quantum jumping?
Yes, but what are you talking about it exactly? Because I've heard about,
With the
go ahead.
timeline, if the timelines are all running, I
Hmm.
guess a parallel, as you say, and we're living all of these different lives at one time, then quantum jumping makes sense because um, I've had an experience where I was kind of stuck quantum jumping, trying to figure out which reality it was that I actually belonged in, and kept finding myself going from like timeline to timeline to timeline, trying to figure out how to get back to this one. And what you just say there just really lines up with that whole theory.
Wow, that's very interesting. And so, how did you access that, for example, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
I was sleeping actually,
Hmm.
and it felt like I was stuck. I was I called it the in between for years, and I was able to go from like reality to reality until I figured out how I got back, and I actually got back. I think it was episode 10 or so where I talked about it. I actually got back because I ran into a physicist a physics professor, I guess, at from Cornell, who told me how to get back.
Wow, very interesting. But you see, and I've experienced, I mean, I'd love to hear what he said exactly on how to come back. But I realized that when I was training myself early, about 10 years ago to become aware, like I noticed that that was the entryway into a path of awakening and understanding and activating your psychic abilities. Awareness, simply that. So let's say you're aware of yourself at all times. You look at yourself as if you're above your body, looking down at your physical body, experiencing whatever it is that you're experiencing. So that kind of awareness is incredibly powerful. We don't really realize that. But when I started practicing that every moment of every day, I began to do that in dream time. And so even in dream time, I used to become aware of myself having a dream. And then I began to be able to make choices, began to move different places to navigate those dreams. And then I started to do astral projection. So it's really incredible, and we have the ability of even healing ourselves by tapping in to fragments of ourselves that are not in this timeline. So, for example, one time I became so ill, and this is something that I've worked with several of my clients as well. Um, I had them tap into an aspect of themselves that was well, that was healthy, and they brought that into their present moment, and they were able to relieve pain. I mean, really, really, awful body pain, everything from a toothache to, an ulcer or anything that was happening in the body. So we have these tools. We just need to learn how to use them. And it really shows us that we are moving in this quantum field that is not limited by the physical and by, the perceived limitations that we have.
Jared, you got anything?
Yeah. So originally, I don't think, based on our first interview with Geraldine, that we were going to talk about it. I wanted to point out to Chuck Bam that we had discussed, her experiences and abductions are in our first episode. I want to reference that. But Chuck put a good twist on the question, which was, do you have anything recent since the last time we have spoken about that you would care to share about? Have you had any other further abductions or horror stories, as he
Horror
put it?
stories.
As he put
Yes.
it. Just shout out to Chuck
Shout out to Chuck. Thank you so
and
much
the
for that.
internets.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I have contact experience. It doesn't happen every single day. It happens, I would say, more consciously now, but I have been experiencing very interesting sightings. For example, the other day, about a week ago, I went for a jog, and it was, sunset, and something told me to look up. And as I look up, I see these white lights, incredibly high. And this is not a plane, it's not a helicopter, it's not a drone, it's incredibly high, right? All you can see is the light. And at first I thought maybe it's a satellite, because at sunset, oftentimes you can see satellites, but satellites tend to glide across the sky, and they kind of disappear into the horizon. But this kind of craft was zigzagging and stopped almost exactly above me. And when I connect to it, I just telepathically in my mind ask, what it's about. And an image showed up in my mind about the interior of a craft. And so anyway, they remove themselves, and they shoot up higher into the sky, and they disappear, the three of them. This happened 3 days in a row. I didn't, actually, it wasn't the exact same time, but it was at sunset around that same lighting. But it was in different locations on my walk. And so that night, I had these incredibly vivid dreams where I, one night, was encountered by a mantid being. And I'd never seen a mantid this close, this vivid, this clear. So that was interesting. And what that exchange was about was just some information about some research that I had been doing. Mantids tend to kind of look at sciences. They're kind of like the chemists, the biologists, the scientists, I guess, for some reason. So, this was the most recent experience that happened to me. And I always paint my experiences. I paint. So maybe I'll share that with you guys sometime.
Do you sell your paintings?
I do, yes.
Oh, awesome. Hopefully you
Yes,
got
I
them
do.
up on the website, right?
I have some on the website. Yeah, I don't have too many of my ET experiences up there. I think they're quite personal, but I do have them for show. I will show.
All
Yes.
right. Well, I have a question about the multidimensional body. I want to go back to that again. If we're living all of these different dimensional lives simultaneously, if one of them dies, will this one feel it?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think it's we have to understand what we are and what we're experiencing. If you can just imagine that we are, as opposed to thinking that there is empty space around you, imagine for a moment that you are submerged underwater, and everything around you, even the empty space, is filled. There is no empty space. There is no empty space within the body. There's no empty space outside of our bodies. There's no empty space in the universe. Everything is like an ocean, like a water material substance. So that being said, the way that energy moves, nothing can be deleted, nothing can be eliminated. It can only be transferred. So when we die, the physical may dissolve into neutral material that goes back into this earth plane, but the soul is like an energy that just transfers to the next point based on its vibrational frequency, based on resonance. And this is kind of how we're moving. And what we look like is kind of like this big orb, like let's say a web, and whatever part of that web is consciously aware at this present moment is where that soul essence, or that energy, that life force, is going to be creating. And so the more we become aware, the more we light up these little dots in our web, the more we're asleep, the more we disconnect from those little dots in our web. And so that's kind of like what life and death is. And we are moving constantly through frequencies, manifestations of frequencies, which we are either in alignment with or we're not in alignment with.
So I guess when you die, it's kind of like astral travel, but without the tether.
Astral travel method, yes, in a way, it is. But
Okay.
the tether, let's say, is the vibrational frequency, right? Because that's what's going to move. That's what directs energy.
Okay.
And it's also what brings energy together. For example, when you incarnate into your family, you came into that family because there's a vibrational frequency that was a match to all of those different souls that you're sharing with in that ancestral lineage. And it's the same for your community, with the culture that you were born in, with the country that you live in. Those are all by resonance, by vibrational frequency, connected in some way.
So is the tether that that's connected, that I'm connected to right now, is that the same tether that's connected to all of my bodies?
That's a great question. And I would tend to say no. That's a very complex question because you would really take a look at all the infinite possibilities. I mean, we are infinite manifestations of consciousness. So there's infinite timelines. And you have to remember that even though there are points of reference, of energetic reference that are fragments of ourselves, there within each one of those points of reference, there's also infinite potential possibilities that are part of that. So it's massive, right? It's like the universe. There's infinite, like when you look at the Fibonacci sequence, or when you look at a fractal, you know, those images of a fractal that goes into one, into another one, and it's self-similar all the way to the very end, or there is no end. This is kind of what our creation is. In the non-physical, we are constantly looking at these infinite points of infinite potential.
All right, because Cedric Orange asks, is it true the difference between astral travel and soul travel? One is with a tether, and the other is without the tether. And then,
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, that's a very interesting question. I mean, this astral travel, you are projecting from your physical body. So I guess you would say your tether would be the physical body. But soul travel, I mean, I'm not really sure what that is, or where this ideology comes from exactly. But if I were to think that there was something like soul travel, I would think that you're talking about death. Is that right? I don't know. And if it is, then in a sense, yes, your tether would be the vibrational frequency that is in resonance with this organism that is traveling now, detached from a physical body.
Could the soul be outside of all of our bodies, and it's connected to the bodies via the tether? Like this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I would say no to that, because the soul is the engine of awareness and creation from any point of reference.
Okay.
Okay, and so we are, there's nothing separate. So never think about things as separate or individual. We are interconnected to all things, to everything, um, at the same time.
So is there a different soul for each of our existences?
No, there's not a different soul. It is just one soul.
Wow.
It is one, and there are many different modalities I've been researching recently that do think that there's different souls. But maybe they're right. I don't know. I don't know what it is. All I can say is from what I see in the multidimensional body and what I have experienced in my near death and other out of body experiences, is that there is the one essence that is what is the creative life force that comes into any of those fragments of itself. And whichever one of those fragments is consciously aware at any given time, that's where the experiences are going to be created from. So if you're aware here, or you can be in your body, but your body can be like, basically artificial intelligence. You're just moving mechanically without awareness. But your mind is outside your body in some other fragment of yourself, like an ET live, or you have some other aspect of yourself that can really, it's one soul that's directing that, but where your attention is, it's going to create from that point that you're at. So for example, if you're out of body, that part of your out of body is going to be creating. And it doesn't mean that there isn't, implications to what's going to happen to the physical body. The physical body is also experiencing certain things. And when that happens, the physical body becomes a host to other things that are either conscious or unconscious.
Okay, what about fragmented souls? I mean, we've heard about that on a program or two that we've done. Do you believe the soul can become fragmented?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that fragmentation occurs through trauma. Okay. And trauma, but what that means is that it's still one soul fragmented within all of these experiences that we have throughout life. And we have all of those experiences that are in the non-physical as well. Those are other points of references. So there's still one soul It's just like energy. Energy is just one. It just reallocates itself from different places and then it unites based on resonance into one. So when one soul becomes fragmented, the part that no longer is aware of itself becomes separate in a sense, and it becomes isolated in that space, in that timeline of experience. And so when you do healing, for example, like reintegration of that pain aspect of itself, it reintegrates back to the whole. And so you now, basically, in layman terms, what that means is that you've become aware of that fragment of yourself. This is how we become whole. And we've seen, this has been depicted in many different ways. Like, for example, the Buddhists talk about the rainbow body, right? So the rainbow body is like all the rainbow colors perfectly organized all around you, radiating in an organized manner. So we really actually look that way. The more that we become aware of our fragments of ourselves, we begin to organize the information in our body. We become aware of all the information within the body.
All right. And Shinobi wants to ask a question. And then I'll turn it over to Jared because I feel like I'm hogging all of the time here. Shinobi wants to know, do some people not have a soul?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's what I think about that. I don't think anyone doesn't have a soul. I think that what we want to look at is their awareness of that soul. Right? Their awareness of that life force, creative life force energy, because the soul is basically infinite consciousness, becoming aware of itself. And the only time that we can disable the abilities that come with that soul, with that ability, is by not becoming aware of it, by rejecting that consciousness. And we do that. We do that every day. When we hate ourselves or when we reject ourselves, we are literally rejecting this massive creative life force that is literally a part of our design. And that has the results of that are illness or blockages or suffering or pain. And we really, what we end up looking is like artificial intelligence. We are just mechanically moving, reacting in the cycles of cause and effect throughout our life. So the idea is that we become aware of ourselves. And this is where we can really fall into that parasitic consciousness trap. We begin to get completely disconnected from what is organic, what is truth, what is living, conscious, and aware. And we go into what is dead, what is mechanical, artificial. The problem with that and what's happening globally is that we want to have a crutch, and what that crutch is right now is technology, and that's probably going to be the crutch eventually, as we begin to merge the organic with the inorganic, with artificial intelligence and with other things. So we want to try to be more close to the organic, the conscious, the aware, as humans, and this is all a part of our free will choice of experience, of course.
Well, as far as I'm guessing, Michael, do you have another question right now, or is this where you already told me to jump in?
I'm sorry. Let me ask one more question. I guess I had that mute button down. So do all animals have souls, or is it just humans?
I think that our definition of a soul is not really clear. What is a soul? It is infinite consciousness. And I do believe that animals have like a soul. Definitely, they have a soul. But the way that it functions in this realm is not the same as a human. I think that the human has the abilities of projecting. Just the way I look at it is that we individually are co-creating our experience. And in that co-creation of experience, we have agreed to have other living entities and beings manifested in our energetic space, in our earth plane. In the earth plane, we have a certain number of animals that are manifested that are a part of this natural cycle. And each one of those animals play a certain role in maintaining a balance in nature, right? In continuing this lifespan. they're a very intricate and integral part of a chain of life that we have here on Earth. So I think that they do have a soul, but they follow a more natural order of creation. As opposed to humans, what makes us different is that the human has the ability to choose. They have the ability to apply free will and direct where that attention, that creation energy is applied. And it's somewhat different.
All right, Jared. I'll step aside for a little while.
Oh, well, you don't have to, but where I know some of the I don't know. I just asked a question. Where do you feel Carillion photography falls in on all this, and just general exterior vibrational medicine that's, I guess, currently known? I mean, do you feel like there's a place for that specifically? Is it limited to just this dimension? Do you think the Carillion photography is maybe tackling something dimensionally?
Yeah, I think it's really wonderful to have that as a tool to just become aware of the energetic space and heat, sensing the heat in movements and variations in the body. And when I say heat, I'm talking about the energy, right? That is emitting at different ranges in the body. And I think it's important to use that tool as just a tool to aid our understanding that there is more than this physical body. But I think that the Carillion photography is very limited. It's incredibly limited because those that can see, and there's many people that can see the multidimensional body. I mean, our bodies are massive. And if I compare what I see in a Carillion photography and what I see outside of that, our bodies are massive. So that means that we haven't really accessed the technology to help us capture the frequencies that are, beyond our limited understanding. So hopefully, we'll be able to have that technology at some point. But anyway, ideally, the most important thing is that we activate that ability within us organically, not using photography.
Yeah, you haven't seen any practical uses for it.
I mean, I've seen it in many different, lab tests of people that can see energy and magnify their energy, and pranic healing tests, even qigong practices and masters that have been, photographed in their work, and it's very interesting, right? It's great.
Yeah.
It helps us see what that is. And it's great, but I think that we have to learn how to activate that vision in our own selves, because we can.
Yeah, I mean, do you feel like there's anyone that you can look to that people would be interested in checking out as far as research that's? I feel like we're in a renaissance as far as an age of Eastern and Western medicine finally coming together a little more coherently between, for instance, meridians and chakras, et cetera, and the Carillion, the vibrational medicine as a whole. But as far as practical researchers, or is anyone you look to that's promising anything exciting that you're seeing or interesting to you?
Well, definitely Claude Swanson was a person that I found. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he did a lot of research on the scientific basis of subtle energy. And he did use, Carillion photography for several of the experiments, along with other kinds of, energetic measurement tools to measure pranic healing. I mean, and there is so much on that. I mean, I don't know, people just need to research it. There's so many papers, even in the medical field, of, how pranic healing has really, really, it's been demonstrated and measured energetically. So Claude Swanson's one of them, and I know that there are a couple qigong masters that have also utilized some of this technology, as well as other even further advanced technology to measure energy.
Okay, and then I mean, it's outside of an energy standpoint, as far as any crossovers in your experience of dimensional living, do you feel it's kind of an offshoot, but do you feel like at any point there's any convergence to a single entity, or do you think that these other dimensions, I mean, look, mathematically, and quantum mechanics wise, there would be more than one universal experience. But as far as it being tied together as an experience, do you really do you think that they're separate people, you in multiple dimensions, or is it really just shadows or refractions of this single universe, that they're not actually true universes, they're just more like reflections or waves in an uninterrupted pitcher in a pool that's gotten a rock thrown in it? Is it really just an echo?
Yeah. And I mean, who's to say that this is the true universe? We could be in one of those, projections, but I definitely do think it's like one of these refracted images of that. And it's definitely not me. I mean, me, what is right now, is such a tiny, limited, insignificant manifestation of some kind of idea, right? The body, the mind, whatever I am right now. I mean, there are other potential expressions of infinite consciousness that are available to us in many different, and I do think that they are not limited to what we are here. I think they're everything, and I think that this really begins to go into the topic of ET interaction and intercommunication. We talk about channelers, peoples that are contactees that begin to connect with these interdimensional beings. I think that we are really creating our own experiences, and what we encounter is a fragment of our own self. It's a fragment of our own self. We keep looking, and we assign meaning and assign form to what we're interacting with. But you got to remember that it's almost as if we keep referencing back to a limited database, and the limited database is giving us information as to what this ET is. Like, for example, the gray. There's grays, there's reptilians, there's draconians, there's Pleiadians, and there's this, right? We have, let's say, 40 different kinds of ETs that we keep looking at. And we keep seeing the same forms and shapes, So I feel that those are the part of, they're the names that we have assigned for this current timeline. But when you go beyond this timeline, I mean, there could be infinite possibilities and manifestations of life forms that we couldn't even conceive. So this is just one of those possibilities.
So in my research, in the 4 years I spent working on my book, one of the things that I came across was something called terra preta. It's an engineered soil. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
It was, so it's found in Brazil, it's found in North Africa, it's found in Australia, it's found, and then it's not just terra preta, there's other kinds, chernozems, they're found all over the earth. And it was the fundamental pillar that I built that led me to the revelation that there was definitely at least one worldwide advanced society that had everything tuned in, from the soil to abilities that we now take for granted or think are superhuman, like Wim Hof, Stig Severinsen. I got to train under Wim Hof the first time he was here as the first group in America to train with Wim. And that's been like 3 years now, I think. But the idea that there was a more advanced society on this planet, and one of the things I point to for that is interconnectivity, genetic memory. We're proving that out in mainstream science. You can pass memories. You can pass traumatic memories. Of course, we start with traumatic. We never start with love, but they were able to prove all those things. And then the times that people think they have a memory of a past life, and I've often described it as tapping into that collective human consciousness that during this is a long setup for a question, which is partially, so you have, like Leonardo da Vinci, very creative guy, but when he thought of stuff, he thought of it with a corkscrew, with metal. We have people now that you can argue, well, they're thinking of things because it's based on some other fundamental work. But I would say the scale, depth, and breadth of what we're discussing, or where we're at now with quantum switching and graphene conductors and the genetic sciences, and where we are, has to do with collective, I call it collective human RAM, that because we have re-achieved 8 billion people, and some of those people we think are worth eliminating because they are simpler, or they live in a jungle or forest or desert or Arctic region. The reality is that the total collective human consciousness has expanded. So rather than having 500 million people on the planet, you could think as far as a corkscrew. Here we are with quantum computing, because there's also a collective reactivation of superhuman abilities, like Wim Hof, et cetera, stuff like that. And our meditations have gone from something thought-provoking, or I'm having a meditation, to actual experiences that are quite spectacular and beyond maybe what we can describe in this interview. And I've certainly talked about it extensively too. But when I look at this past, our ancient past, it truly appears that there was a worldwide society that could control all these things, program these things, that there are slivers and truths in all the religions. But the reality is these superhuman abilities mixed with our awareness that the soil on this planet, it right down to it, really indicates a much larger population, not just for growing food, but for piezoelectric connectivity properties and reasons. My thought leading now to the actual question is that if we once had maybe even more people and a larger collective human consciousness, I'm wondering how much time we actually spent in the space where we do now, where you and I are talking over a computer and over a phone. And I'm wondering how, not in a mystified, deified, forgotten religious way, that we collectively, the reason, for instance, the sliver of truth in reincarnation is that through collective memory and like RAID disk arrays, we were able to collectively save everyone's, in quotes, soul. That the manifestation of reincarnation is that, we've deified it in the sense that, well, if you're a bad person, you come back as a toad, or you have something to learn, or et cetera, et cetera. But that's all the religious deification of what was once, maybe if we had the ability to collectively store and outside of the human body and reanimate that person should something catastrophic happen. Is it more possible? And this is the question, I guess. Is it more possible, as we look back in even your research, to the various out of place, out of time artifacts, and the various these anomaly abilities, in quotes, which they're not. They're just collectively all things we can and are capable of doing, like in the paleo world, positive gene expression, that there is actual changes at the mitochondrial level. So is it possible that reincarnation as a whole is really just a memory of a time where we could tap into that RAID array, that zip file, and pull people back from what is collectively, they're still there, but their consciousness is really just rather tied up without a body, or in pause, almost like a purgatory?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that time has ever ended. I think that it's here all the time. It always has been, right? I think that we have gone through cycles of, as in everything, we are constantly moving through cycles of evolution. And within those cycles of evolution, we go through moments where the collective is more aware of itself and more unaware of itself. And so we're going through that moment in time where we are more aware of ourselves. And that's how we're tapping into this quote unquote technology of this multidimensional body, which has the ability to access all of these superhuman abilities, as you mentioned. So I don't believe that it's ever not been there. I feel that this is just a part of the cyclical pattern of evolution that we go through. And we are coming from, I mean, if we look back at ancient civilizations, which were far more advanced than we are in some ways, and the amount of knowledge and sciences and the physics that they were able to reach, and we think, oh my God, these people had sticks and stones. How were they able to reach this kind of knowledge? I think that we have cycled many times through these generations of incredibly advanced technology and understanding. And I think that what we're experiencing in our human timeline, in this one timeline, is just one reflection of, we are living side by side simultaneously next to those civilizations that are advanced in our exact same space that we're in right now. Because we tend to think of space as being, static, and there's nothing there. But we're constantly moving in and out of all of those potential timelines.
Yeah, there's There's definitely a group on this planet that's been here a really long time,
Yeah. Hmm.
and they've
they mentioned
definitely.
that today on Fox News.
Oh, yeah.
I heard it. They were talking about the UFO thing that they have to release on May 1st. And they were talking, saying that if it's not aliens, it could be an ancient civilization. If I could
Uh-huh.
You're
say,
kidding.
if I could
This is
say
my
the
book.
word, yeah, it's the first time I've ever heard it on a major news network.
Mainstream.
Them put it
Yeah,
that
it's
way.
so funny how it's all coming out. But yeah, I mean, nothing is new. And Arthur, you're writing a book about that. So yeah, that's great.
Who's Arthur?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I read your name on
Oh, Arthur
your
aliens.
chat. It
Oh,
says Arthur.
oh yeah. So I'm not a huge fan of Facebook, and I've never been on it. But Mr. Michael here, for the sake of recordings, has decided that this is the platform. So for the first person in the history of my life to make me get on this platform is Michael. Everyone can give him a hand. But I spend no time. I creep on no one. I do nothing except do what we're doing now and connect for interviews. But yeah, so no, it's just Jared. But yeah, my book, I spent 4 years on it. Olaf Phillips from Anomalies Publishing and Paranoia Magazine is my publisher. And I put that out after I spent a month in South Africa with Michael Tellinger at Stone Circle Lodge in that area doing research. But it came out last February, so it's been a year and a couple months, but it was 4 years of work prior to that, including 6 months of editing to put out It's Not Aliens, Worse, It's Us, Discovering Our Lost History, which is absolutely about at least one worldwide advanced human society that fell. And I think it happened more when that city off the coast of Cuba that we all know of, that somewhere around 55 or 60,000 years ago, it wasn't the Younger Dryas that put them out of commission. It was the worldwide society broke up, I think, in that catastrophe in that 55, 60,000 year range. And then we have the period that's just sucking it until the Younger Dryas. And then, of course, it's really Stone Age for most of us and survivors that were on the surface. But I do think like a cruise ship quantity of highly advanced humans survived, but they were people who could mix drinks but not make alcohol, people who could work on machines but didn't know how to make foundries, or they were aware of, for instance, cell phone technology. But to get back to the 0.30 G turn space, what we're calling UFOs, which is really, I think, advanced humans that for their own reasons have chosen to leave us to our own devices. Which is why I say it's not aliens, worse, it's us. They're not. They may appear as what you would describe as reptilians or Palladians, or fill in the blank, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, fill in the blank. But I think more likely, personally, is that it is a remnant of our very own ancestors who have the ancillary technology, including genetic, to, if you are going to run a 30 Mach 30 0-point turn device, you may need to be short, translucent with big black eyes in order for your onboard display to work directly with your mind control to that technology. And what we're mistaking as foreign bodies in the universe we're either the most crazy cool planet anthropologically, even as a study in the whole galaxy, or maybe it's actually our great, 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 great ancestors who are like, we're so sorry we closed the door on you tens of thousands of years ago, but, we had to save ourselves, and then kind of awkward, we came out later, and here you are on the planet, and, well, there's not enough of us to take it all back over, but they reapplied the technology they had, they genetically modify themselves as needed, and we mistake them as from not from this planet. That's the general premise of my book. Not that it's not worth reading, because Dr. Gerald Pollack, The Fourth State of Water, Sound, Frequencies, Energies, The True Nature of Cymatic Polygonal Construction, and of course, abilities, superhuman abilities, like not just Wim Hof and Stig Severance and stuff, and controlling your immune system, but also there's other abilities like synesthesias, where we have full control of all of our senses. And these are all together with engineered ancient lost things like piezoelectric properties and self-replicating and maintaining ancient engineered soil that was connected to things like the Nazca line. So we have a worldwide culture that clearly would have not just the abilities to move big blocks, but we're working on scales of energy and frequency use combined with, again, how do you make a chicken before an egg? You just program it. It's not a rando thing. You don't suddenly, we have no examples in any paleoanthropological record of a creature going from laying an egg to not laying an egg, but you can certainly create a creature that lays eggs. And so what we think of, like you're saying earlier, of what's natural, when we think of technology, we think of the things we're sitting on. We don't realize that as they get deeper and deeper, like even in vibrational medicine, as they've figured out cutting off limbs on salamanders and measuring the negative electronic flows and the electrons, and repeating that with frogs that evolutionarily, in quotes, could not regrow limbs, but now they got them to regrow limbs, and etc. Over and over, we start describing, well, it appears that there's electronic switching going on at the cellular level.
Well, they could also be fallen angels, Jared.
You're just a funny guy.
Well,
And so the reality is that we keep describing more and more as we learn on the cellular level that nuclear cold fusion's happening, that we have electronic switching, and we're using more and more words that we would describe a robot out of the sci-fi series like Westworld. And the reality is that what we're mistaking, in my opinion, what we're mistaking as a natural world could be a very large terraformed, once upon a time, very organized, beautiful, interworking system that did include. I'm revisiting Ken Burns's The West, and they came across some native peoples, and they talk about the culture of some of the indigenous Indians in America that would describe something when it was very, very old. They pointed out that it was, how long ago did that one thing happen? And the answer would be in the storytelling that it was back when we could still talk with dogs. And I think those are those echoing slivers of truths about how complex and how connected our world was. But it wasn't in an abstract, spiritual way. Not that we aren't spiritual and not that we don't have that component. It's just, my thought was that it was part of a very well-connected, well-designed, gorgeous system that is beyond our current 10 to 15% sleep mode version. But if Fox News is talking about it's not aliens worse, it's an ancient society, well,
they didn't say worse.
Well, right. So, damn it.
What do you think, Geraldine? You think that we're a slave species?
I don't tend to think of it that way. I don't. The way I look at it, I think that we are just naturally evolving, and that we are an expression of one potential. And I think that this potential is experiencing duality. And in that duality, we're looking at good and bad. And within that good and bad is manifested all kinds of forms and creatures that we merely cycle through archetypes of manifestations of beings that we allocate. We try to allocate certain designated meaning to them. And, we say these draconians, these archons, and all these things. And I mean, we can look at the story of origin, like, for example, in the book of Enoch and all of those ancient scriptures that talk about how we have descended, or we have been biologically, created from the origin race. And even myself, this is something that I channeled, that I downloaded originally when I first got into all of this, is that there are three main bloodlines that seeded life on this planet, and now the human race is a product of that I guess that DNA, the alterations, those genetic mutations. I guess you can say that we are now a product of that. But I believe that all of that is within the parameters of one potential timeline, and that humans have the ability to apply free will, which means that they can choose as creators. I think there's a lot of evidence that we are creators, more so than that we are imprisoned or under the control of something external to us. I think that we have within the chemistry, within the design, within the biology, the genetic code of this human body, the ability to co-create really anything at any time. And so when we begin to activate that, we can really begin to play in this, holographic realm that we're interacting in. So I tend to think of it more that way, and I feel that we can move through and manifest and create our reality as we wish.
I know a lot of people who would argue with you that free will.
Oh yeah, I know, and even, even this is, it feels very.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. And even myself, I thought that we did not have free will because, and in a way, you can say that free will is limited by our environment, right? By the environment. But again, all of that is limited by our parameters of belief and understanding of our environment, the understanding of our reality, which is very limited, I think. Our science is incredibly limited. It's primitive. It doesn't really understand the next level of the human and what the human is capable of manifesting and creating. So,
oh my God, you're so right about that. It's not even next level. We are, for a number of reasons we will not discuss on YouTube. We are literally in the dark ages.
we are,
It's
yeah.
it's insane. And half, I think, the fog of war of it is when you're doing such complex, higher level reactivating work like you're doing. And on top of it, trying to do it with what is not only a mixed written history, but one with intentional frauds. And at the same time, you have a number of governments and organizations, without even discussing conspiracy, that have blurred the very foundations for you to build work on. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, that's all exactly very true. And the thing is that we tend to look at that, those of us that care to do the research to back up what you just said right now, which is extensive amount of research. It takes a lot of time to come to that conclusion, in an authentic way, in a genuine way. But when you do, it takes a lot for you as a human, I think, to be able to question, do I even have free will? And if I do, what are the mechanics of that free will? What does it mean for me to take all of these truths, quote unquote truths that have been fed into me and turn them upside down? What is truth? It's so difficult to understand that. So I feel like the more that we look at, let's say, nature, like what you were talking about earlier, but if you look at nature, the mechanics within a flower or within a natural, plant, it grows without questioning its existence. It knows exactly what to do. It's not imposed upon any systems or beliefs. The human is very much like that plant. It has the ability of expressing itself and growing and, learning how to manifest itself within its environment in a balanced way. So we have the technology. The technology is there. We just have to look inside to be able to understand this outside world, which inverts truths, inverts the divine, inverts the purity of our creative abilities.
Well, let me ask a question. You would probably know more from experience than any of us here. What do you think they are? Do you think they're aliens? Do you think they're advanced humans? Could they be fallen angels? What do you think?
That's a fantastic question, which I don't believe I will ever answer accurately. I can only begin to dream what that answer might be. But, I've gone very deeply into these questions in meditation and also navigated the universe from my perspective up until the edges of the universe. And what I see is that we have no idea because, again, not only is our science limited, but our belief systems we can only pull from the Akashic records, which is, I do believe that in some way the Akashic records is fabricated, right? Our access to that Akashic record, to the information that is there with our historical lineage, is somehow tied to this dimensional plane, this dimensional experience. So if you keep looking at things from this Earth perspective, you're never going to know the truth. You have to go beyond that to be able to see what is truth. And when you go beyond that, you kind of lose all those forms. Aliens, angels, beings, entities, archons. I mean, they lose their form. So the way I look at it is duality. These are all the many different archetypes and characters that this negative, quote unquote, negative parasitic consciousness plays in this earth. And this is all the forms that this constructive consciousness plays. I think we simply are choosing from the two. And I look at it that way because I feel that it allows us to step away from being attached to characteristics, imageries, and these little outside things that we can identify. Even the mantid that I came across the other day, right? What is that? It's a projection of what's in my own subconscious mind. God knows what that intelligence is. It can be my own self, my own fears, my own whatever, but it can also be mind control. There's so many things that play a role in this creation.
So on that note, do you think that of the times that, not getting into the abductions or the experiences you've had specifically, but is there any language, personality, is there any commonality between the experiences that you've had with anyone else who you've helped? The question, have you been able to connect with anyone that's come in for help that doesn't know everything about you, so they're not just repeating something, but have you been able to get, out of the hundreds of people you've dealt with, stories that overlap so closely? Has there been any individual story that has overlapped almost identically with yours, or in their experience with a UFO, was there any language or anything identical?
Yes. And I almost want to say almost all of them have had parts of these experiences that are so incredibly similar that are just mind-blowing. And so this is what drives my desire to research this phenomena, because what's happening here? Are we going through a, global psychosis? Is this a global psyops that we're all experiencing? Or is this some kind of real thing that's actually happening here? And here's why I have that question, because since the 50s, we've been hearing, even earlier than that, right? There's records of these experiences of what these ETs look like. And there's also an inception of information that was put in by the government, why they created the whole gray thing, right? And then there was also the thing about Eisenhower and the gray thing, right? So aside from all of that, let's look at all the other extraterrestrial races that were put in, right? There's the mantids, there's the draconians, the reptilians, all these things. And then we look at the connection of those draconians to the to the Anunnakis. Okay, so we're referencing historically some things. But here's what is very interesting is that when I first came out about my story, I thought, I'm nuts for having all these experiences. But when I went to a support group for the first time, I really, honestly, the first time was incredibly emotional for me, because I heard people talking about things that were so detailed. Like, for example, you go into this room that has no light. It has light on the very bottom rims of the room. It has this mechanical thing that comes down from this nowhere. It looks like it's nowhere. And this very unique little light that's at the end of this long prong that comes into your mouth, and very, very specific things, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, I experienced that. Why are these stories so similar? And now, years later, after talking with so many experiencers, there's so many parallels in the things that they experience, the order of the experience. Let's look at the hybridization program. It's exactly the same thing every time. There's a visitation, there's insemination, extraction, retrieval, and then there's a presentation. Why are these women experiencing the same thing? And then they have their physical symptoms that go along with that, right? So this is incredible, So my question is, what's happening that so many people, and these are the people that come out publicly. I have a lot of clients that they don't want to come publicly. They don't want to even talk about it with anyone. People that are in the stock market that talk to me from New York that are telling me, Geraldine, I've had this experience the other day and it's traumatized. This reptilian mounted me, wanted to have intercourse with me, and then now I literally cannot have sex with anyone. I'm traumatized after this. It was a dream, but it was more than a dream. There's hundreds of stories like that, guys. So we really need to question what's happening, right? Obviously, in my mind, if there's so much similarity and parallels in these stories, maybe this is mind control, right?
Yeah.
Is it mind control? Or, is it really these specific races that keep coming up? Because then when you start looking at the MyLab part of it, the MyLab military abductions, let me clarify, sometimes they screen or they utilize drugs that will scramble your memories or make it look like you're looking at extraterrestrials as well. So, and they have that technology as well. So how much of these experiences are involving military? How much of these experiences are truly these interdimensional contact experiences? There are. Go ahead. You were going to ask.
I think it's important before we get too much further, because just generally in the chat, I do think there's something that in your lifetime of research and in mine, and just for everyone out there, we do not know each other personally. So I'm not saying this to, this is something that as a researcher, when you have the questions in mind and you go down these rabbit holes, there are many, many places that I had to go when I said I spent 4 years on my work. And I haven't spent 4 years. I've spent a lifetime researching stuff like this. But when you get to these different experiences, part of it is when you're looking for a physical item, you can have provenance. You can actually find an object that's in situ and you can come up with an answer. When it comes to these experiences, I think one of the things that Geraldine is talking about that I think you guys need to hear is that the people she's working with, and I don't think it should be lost on people, because I've met very intelligent, smart, in fact, even Christian, and I don't say that as a negative. I say that simply that people who do not believe in aliens, who have disclosed ridiculous sightings. I mean, like just crazy sightings. But for Geraldine's benefit, I would like you to, and for the audience, I wanted you to just expand a little bit on, because you mentioned Wall Street. These are in the scope of the people that you are helping and dealing with. How crazy professional are these people? These are not go to the summer solstice festival and put on a wreath sort of people and believe in fairies.
Right. Yes, that's exactly right. And that's what adds credibility to some of these things, because
Absolutely.
you're even talking about people that, don't spend time in the sci-fi realm. They're not watching sci-fi movies. Some of these are moms. For example, this lady from Peru that lives out in the countryside in the middle of nowhere was able to get in touch with one of the shamans that had a retreat down there. And she had been having these continuous experiences. This lady that's away from all technology, she doesn't have the ability to look at films or interviews of any kind. She talks about her experience, and it's really incredible because it is very similar to some of the other experiences I've heard in the hybridization program. So you're talking people like that, all the way to people that are doctors, therapists, people that are, over here I have people from Stanford, a lot of my clients from Stanford, for Berkeley, Google, I live in the Silicon Valley. So I have people from all over here in the Bay Area, but from other countries as well. Germany, Switzerland, Spain, England, India, Russia, Australia. I have clients from all around the world, and they do every kind of walk of life. So this is what really makes you raise the question. It's not just the U.S. It's not just certain areas in the U.S., because that was one of the things that I wanted to rule out in my research as well. Is this just something that's happening in certain areas in the U.S.? So that's why I was thinking maybe mind control in certain army bases or something like this, right? Which is a thing, but we're not talking about that.
No, but there are, just a side note for everyone listening, again, there are definitely on the bullshit meter. There are definitely people who hear about other people's experiences, and they, like, just like everything else in the world of reality television and MTV, want to join in or participate, whatever the trend, fad, you name it. But again, the people that we're describing right now are very professional and they more likely have season tickets to something, and it's not anything to do with AlienCon.
That's right. Yes, that's absolutely correct.
It is a bother for some of your clients, the fact that it's so, first off, what they've experienced is so traumatizing, but it is a bother for them that they have to even slow down to manage their frustrations and pain with it, correct?
That's exactly right. And what's interesting is that, they will go perhaps to a regular psychologist, and the psychologist will not have the experience to be able to deal with something like that, first of all, or they will discount it, or they will prescribe medication for the person, and so that's very unfortunate, because of course, it can be anything. People can really, truly be having some kind of psychological breakdown and having these kinds of ideas. But then there are another large number of people that really, truly have these experiences and that have been affected and are experiencing clinically measured PTSD as a result of these experiences. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
and I think that's one of the things that gets lost on people is that there on one hand, it's become a mainstream popular subject with a number of people just BSing their way through it, and it's a frustration on my part personally. There are people I won't talk about, but I guess I sort of mentioned it. But I mean, if you the whole Star Trek thing, if you sound like you're hearing an episode of Star Trek or Stargate, you're listening to an episode of Star Trek and Stargate, and actual experiences for the people who have experienced them, and based on their field of professions and lifestyle and where they're at. This is not I know what I'm going to put on my personal roster. I'm going to put on a terrifying abduction experience or encounter because I have time for that in my normal life, and it'll be fun at parties.
All right, and I know we
Yeah.
covered this in part 1, but for the people who are here that don't know, can you give a brief explanation of what the hybrid program is?
Sure. Just briefly, the hybridization program is basically, well, I call it a program because I feel that there is a certain specific agenda behind this activity. There are many different hybrid programs and agendas that are run by interdimensional beings, extraterrestrial beings, and government as well. And what it is that basically they will take genetic material from a man or a woman, and they will use it to create another living organism. And whether it's a humanoid or another extraterrestrial looking being, even interdimensional being, they're using the genetic material to create that. And there's a whole process to that. I'm sure you can refer back to the previous interview that we did.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is that women will experience the pregnancy, and after a certain amount of time of gestation, it is then removed. And usually what's reported and what I have experienced myself is that the children are presented to the mother or even the father at a later time. So the question is, why is it happening? Why are there children? Why are they using genetic material? All these things.
And a lot of this, you think, goes on underground in the dumbs.
Yes, I definitely think, not only do I think, but I personally, from personal experience, know that it is occurring, through the government, but also it's happening with these supposed interdimensional beings, right? This is one aspect that we're talking about. And so it affects men and women around the world. There are hundreds of thousands of women around the world that have experienced this. And just recently, we did a show on the Discovery Channel. And as a result of that show, I'm getting hundreds of emails from people around the world that are talking to me about their experiences.
Yeah, I'm sure
Wow.
that there's a lot that goes on that we will probably never know about, at least openly.
For sure, yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's going to do it for part 2, everybody. If you want to hear about the hybridization program, go check out part 1. I believe it's episode 73. or 72. One of them. Just go through the list and look for it. You'll see it. Geraldine, can you tell everybody where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. If you'd like to get a hypnotherapy session with me or DNA reprogramming, you can reach out at geraldineorozco.com. And if you would like to participate in my monthly support groups for experiencers and contactees, you guys can reach hybridmother.com. And as always, it was an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me and your amazing questions. And thank you.
It's always great to have you on. We're really looking forward to part 3. And real quickly, Jared, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, well, at the end of April, you guys can come in person and see me at a lecture at America's Stonehenge in New Hampshire on May 1st. That would be Saturday, May 1st.
I'll be there too, I think.
Yes, yeah. And then, of course, you can always find me at notaliens.com and on Rockfin. I have a channel now. And you can always get my book. If you don't want to get a signed copy at Not Aliens, you can certainly get one on Amazon. But look, there will be tickets being sold if you'd like to see virtually at the America's Stonehenge on May 1st. There will be a virtual Zoom if you want to join that way. Otherwise, in person, I'll be giving a lecture and then walking the site.
Yeah, and we're hoping to get some of that streaming live on Conflict TV. Just go over there and subscribe to that. Remember, you can always find us on the internet. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on all of your normal podcast catchers, including Spreaker, Apple TuneIns, iHeart Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We are there. Be sure to check out the members area. It's new on the YouTube channel. We do some exclusive after shows. We'll be doing one today, so be sure to check that out. Until next time, thanks everyone for being here, batten down the hatches, and be safe.